Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Whitaker, and I was asked to share with you a little bit about how to interact, how to mind the gaps of the multi-generational context that we find ourselves in. And I decided what I wanted to share with you was some very practical but very simple things that I'm pretty sure all of you already know. But I feel like it's just a really good reminder. I know for me, I oftentimes just need to be reminded of the basics and reminded of what God's called me to and how to walk that out and actually to appreciate the importance of things that we take for granted that we do naturally. So I wanted to start off with just picturing this is a cemetery that is right behind where I live. And what I think about constantly when I do walks through the cemetery is I think about the stories that are behind each one of those stones, each one of those markers of a life. I recognize that there is a lifetime of stories, of experiences. And I think one of the ways that we help this generation know their place, where we can inspire and encourage them, is that we tell them the stories of those that have gone before. And I know we often talk about that in YWAM, and we say, oh, share your stories, but I just want to encourage us that we really take time to do that. And as I continue to go, the next thing I wanted to say something about was the importance of being on a journey with the people that we are walking with. We recognize that we are walking with them and they desire to walk alongside us. And so I want to challenge all of us to be looking around for the people that we can invite to walk with us and journey with us as we are on this road that God has called us to. And then as leaders ourselves, we need to be willing to and looking for people that we're going to journey with, the generation above us, that we can come alongside and say, hey, can I hang out with you? Can I be with you? Because there's such a desire in all of our hearts to journey, to be with. And so I want us to be able to journey with those that are older than us, but I also want us to really be intentional in inviting the younger generation to come alongside with us, to go on trips with us, to come to different outreaches that we're doing, not just official outreaches, but just times when we're going to visit people or we're going to do some type of ministry time, and we want to say to those people, that younger generation, hey, why don't you take this trip with me? Why don't you come along with me? And I have had so many young people when I'm teaching in DTSs come up to me and say, could I go on a trip with you? And I think, wow, what a privilege that they're asking that. And I think we may think, oh, they don't want to hang out with us, or they don't want to be with us in that context. And yet I know my greatest discipleship has been when I've journeyed with those who have mentored me. And so I want to challenge us as a mission, and as we continue to see how can we reach out to this generation, that we just simply invite them and say, come with me and hang out, come with me and experience what I do firsthand, but not just what I do maybe in front of the classroom or in a specific organized outreach, but just come with me and live life for a couple weeks and let's talk and let's be together, or maybe longer than a couple weeks. So the third area that I wanted to talk about with minding the gap, and that is I have found in the last several years as I've taught in DTSs that students are hungry just to sit around the table and have a meal together. So I want to ask you, are you inviting your students or those you're discipling? Are you inviting the next generation or the older generation to come and have a meal with you? It's very interesting to me that as I've taught recently in the last several years, I've taught on the life of Jesus. And I do a whole section on Jesus around the table. In the book of Luke, there are so many examples. If you just start reading through the book of Luke, you see again and again and again where it says, and Jesus went to the house of the Pharisees to have a meal. And Jesus was invited by the tax collectors to have a meal. And it just over and over and over again. And it was in those very natural contexts of a meal that so many of the parables, many of the lessons that we teach off of have come out of Jesus sitting around the table and having this very natural context that he's interacting with people, and then a conversation happens or a discussion starts or they start asking him questions. And we end up with these jewels of parables that he shares. And that's not something that just happened with Jesus. That happens when we sit around the table and we get a chance to interact with and talk with those that we invite. So as I'm thinking about what does it mean to mind the gaps? Where are the gaps in the generation? How do we help YWAMers in a multi-generational context? I think, like I said in the beginning, it's just very simple and yet very profound that we tell stories, we share our stories, not just our stories, but stories of those who've walked before us. We give and we make a place where there's a context that we are part of a much larger story. And I think this generation is longing to hear that. They are longing to know that they're not isolated, that they're part of this bigger story of God. And so we can remember those who've gone before us. We can tell those stories, and then we can share our own stories. And then we can say, and let's see what stories God's doing in your life. And then secondly, as I said, we can journey with them. Both we invite the next generation or the younger generation to journey with us. And we also seek out the older generation and ask if we can journey with them. So I want to encourage us to do that, to be looking at how can we tell stories, how can we journey, and then finally, how can we create and invite spaces where they are coming around the table. I want you just to think for a minute, who would you invite around your table to have a conversation? Who would you invite from the older generation? Who would you invite from your generation? And who would you invite from the younger generation to sit at these places and to have a meal with you, to tell stories, to share one another's life? These are such simple ways that we can interact with a multi-generational, and within the context of a multi-generational mission. And yet at the same time, they're so profound. So I want to invite you to tell your story. I want to invite you to journey with others. And I want to invite you to invite others around the table. And if I'm anywhere around near in your context, I would love to invite you to sit around my table, and I would love to be invited to sit around your table.